Some of Hollywood's most successful shows of the last several decades have been those set in high school, with many of these shows being the products of the WB and the CW, the networks that are home to the dramatic teens. Beverly Hills 90210, The OC, and One Tree Hill are arguably three of the biggest teen shows of the 90s and early 2000s, but these shows are still drawing in new audiences today via streaming. When One Tree Hill premiered on September 23, 2003, it initially received very poor ratings. Later on, however, the show found its success and went on to run for a total of 9 seasons, becoming a smash hit and a pop culture phenomenon, while making stars out of its young, unknown cast. But despite the success, over the years, One Tree Hill has become almost just as famous for its issues behind the scenes. While drama, messy relationships, breakups, hirings, firings, money issues, and more have plagued the One Tree Hill set, there was something much worse happening behind the scenes. The creator and showrunner Mark SCHWAHN was not only creating and fostering a horrendous work environment with inappropriate behavior, but he was sexually harassing nearly all of the lead female cast members. SCHWAHN would make the cast members' lives miserable, and his disgusting behavior was unrelenting. While we'll be delving into how SCHWAHN conducted himself on the set of One Tree Hill, we'll also be discussing topics such as the cults some cast members were involved in, cast members' arrests, the actors involved in fraud, and many of the on-set relationships. We'll also be diving into the current controversies happening with the One Tree Hill stars today, including alleged feuds and the allegations and whirlwind surrounding One Tree Hill star Sophia Bush's newest relationship. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the dark, twisted, and dramatic world of One Tree Hill. From 1995 until 2006, the WB created hit show after hit show for teens and young adults. The WB saw many successful teen shows with twists, such as Teens Fighting Vampires, Teen Witches, and Teen Superheroes. A few years later, however, after we all survived the Y2K bug, people craved relatability, and it was the dawn of a new era of teen shows. In 2003, we saw the debut of not one, but two of the biggest teen shows of the last few decades, The OC and One Tree Hill. Both were titled after their locations, and both were absolutely wild behind the scenes. One Tree Hill does actually have The OC to kind of thank for some of its success, as the WB ordered some tweaks to the new basketball-centered high school show they wanted to launch after seeing the success of The OC. These tweaks saw a number of reshoots to the pilot to dial up the teen angst, some recasting of key roles, and some additions to the cast from the second episode onward. One Tree Hill was actually originally titled Ravens and was filmed on location in Wilmington, North Carolina, where they also shot Dawson's Creek. Interestingly, the high school where they shot a lot of the first 4 seasons of One Tree Hill, and they shot all of the basketball scenes, was the same school and gymnasium where Michael Jordan played high school basketball. You can see a small nod to Jordan with Nathan Scott, one of the lead characters and best basketball player on the show, wearing the number 23 on his jersey for all of the games the Tree Hill Ravens play. One Tree Hill was extremely successful and ran for a total of 9 seasons. The creator of One Tree Hill, Mark SCHWAHN, based the show on his own experience in a small town high school where he played on the basketball team and, in his words, didn't get any attention from any girls. While One Tree Hill was filming, and several years after the show, rumors and stories swirled about the environment on set and Mark SCHWAHN's extremely unprofessional conduct. But it wasn't until 2017, at the height of the Me Too movement, that some brave female cast and writers spoke out about SCHWAHN's horrendous behavior behind the scenes. We're first going to cover how Mark SCHWAHN was exposed, what happened, and then we'll be dialing it back to the 2000s when One Tree Hill was in production and go into the nitty-gritty details and the entire backstory of what really was going on the set of One Tree Hill. as anytime Mark SCHWAHN was on set, it wasn't anything good. During the viral and global Me Too movement, women all around the world, especially in Hollywood, detailed the assaults and harassment they experienced, putting the spotlight on serial abusers and monsters like Harvey Weinstein. Like so many other women, Hilarie Burton, who played the female lead Peyton Sawyer for the first 6 seasons of One Tree Hill, posted on Instagram in solidarity with the Me Too movement. On October 16, 2017, Burton posted a picture of her hand with Me Too written on her palm, but it was her caption that hinted at something much deeper. Burton's caption read, "It leaves a mark." This was the confirmation that many people had been looking for in regards to the rumors about Mark SCHWAHN. Burton later provided even more confirmation after a fan inquired about her statement, and Burton replied that she had chosen her words carefully, implying that instead of the word Mark, she was actually using the first name Mark. 1 month later, on November 12, 2017, a writer from One Tree Hill, Audrey Rockhope, tweeted about her and her female writing partner's experience as writers on One Tree Hill. Audrey described being subjected to frequent and unwanted touching by SCHWAHN. SCHWAHN also called Audrey's writing partner into his office to try and talk her out of getting married and into dating him, Mark SCHWAHN. After Audrey detailed her experience with SCHWAHN, the floodgates were truly opened, as over the next few weeks, 18 women from One Tree Hill came forward and detailed their experience behind the scenes with Mark SCHWAHN and his disgusting behavior on set. Additionally, all of the male cast members put their support behind the women of One Tree Hill and their statements about SCHWAHN. When this news began to break, Mark SCHWAHN was working on the E! show The Royals. E! at first said they were monitoring the situation, but shortly after the women of One Tree Hill released their open letter and the male stars released their own statements supporting the women of One Tree Hill, 25 cast and crew members from The Royals released their own open letter about SCHWAHN's behavior and sexual harassment throughout the show. After the open letter from The Royals cast and crew, Mark SCHWAHN was fired from the show. He has never spoken out about the accusations and seemingly hasn't worked since this all came out. But many of the One Tree Hill women think that he may be working as a ghostwriter still in Hollywood. In total, over 43 women have come forward about Mark SCHWAHN, and keep in mind, usually only a small minority come forward. A few days later, on November 17th, 2017, Hilarie Burton sat down with Variety to detail her experience with SCHWAHN on set, what she endured, and ultimately the truth around not only why she left the show, but why she never again returned for a guest appearance on One Tree Hill. In earlier seasons, SCHWAHN positioned himself as a mentor to Burton, pushing her character to the forefront, allowing her to sit in on production meetings and offering her support for her dreams of starting a record label. After explaining this in her interview with Variety, Burton said, "I realize now that I was being groomed as bait." All of the female leads from One Tree Hill have spoken about the fact that in the first couple of seasons, Mark SCHWAHN tried to purposely keep all of them separated because he was fearful of the cast members banding together, like the Friends cast famously did, and asking for more money. SCHWAHN used to pit the women against one another, he was manipulative with them, and just all in all tried to get them to hate one another. He also weaponized their personal lives, taking painful personal experiences they'd been through and writing them into the show and getting them to go through them all again on screen. And he also wanted to constantly push them and pressurize them into doing things they were uncomfortable with. A lot of them didn't want to appear on screen in their underwear and bikinis, and SCHWAHN would manipulate and do whatever he could to get them to agree to these things. For example, there was a Maxim shoot and none of the actresses wanted to do it, but Mark SCHWAHN went to one of the cast members, Joy Lenz, who's credited as Bethany Joy Lenz, but she does go by Joy, and he told her she was too fat to appear in the shoot, which is absolutely ludicrous. And he then went to Sophia Bush, Hilarie Burton, and Danielle Harris and said, oh, you have to do the shoot because Joy won't do it. She doesn't want to do it. And that means that it's just the three of you by default. And just to go back to the female cast members appearing in underwear and bikinis, they didn't want to do that. And Mark SCHWAHN continued not only writing it in the show, but putting it more and more frequently, and that was because he would send them to costume, which is completely normal. He sent them, say, to do a bikini costume fit, and usually on a show like this, when they're sending someone to do a fitting, if it's something like a bikini, they'll say, okay, give her 3 or 4 choices, say a red bikini, blue bikini, yellow bikini, and they'll take pictures of the 3 options and they'll send them to the producers and all the people that are, in charge of that episode, and they will pick whichever bikini they think is the best one or the one that they need for the episode. And Mark SCHWAHN would then go and take the pictures of the women in their underwear, in their bikinis, and he made a massive whiteboard, pinboard in his office just full of all of these pictures of these 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old young women in their, a lot of them, first acting job, and he's making a board in his office of them in their underwear. And he also was married with children at this time too. It is 4 o'clock on the day I'm uploading this, but I really just want to add a little tiny little bit of extra additional context here, because this whole underwear exposing skin thing doesn't apply to just the women on One Tree Hill. The men of One Tree Hill have also spoken about this and how they felt like they had to constantly expose themselves, and their characters were very hyper sexualized considering how young they were, especially in the beginning of the show. And in case you don't know, anything like this where people are appearing covered or nude or in underwear and they're having intimacy scenes, these things are so tightly controlled on sets. And I think this is just another way that the CW and WB kind of take advantage of the new cast members that they hire that are quite green, that don't have a lot of experience, and they might not even know that they need to put nudity clause in these contracts or how strict they need to be. Because if you're an experienced actor, say like Jennifer Beals, as you know, I like to put an L word Easter egg in my Coffee and Cults videos because of my original channel. But Jennifer Beals, when she started the L word, she had a no nudity clause in her contract. So even though the show was on Showtime and pretty much all the other cast members appeared topless or nude, that she didn't want to, and that was her right and it was in her contract, and she never did. Same thing with Sarah Jessica Parker on Sex and the City. So when these young actors are saying we were so uncomfortable, etc., it makes me think that they either didn't have a clause or they weren't even really told that they should be getting one. And even things like intimacy coordination, you can't just snap decision, change it in the moment, because they feel as though when people start changing the things they're comfortable with or what's in the contract, that they might have been feeling pressure from higher ups or people on set. And that's why when these scenes are being shot, they have to be followed to the T, because everything is so carefully coordinated when it comes to any sort of skin exposure, body exposure, intimacy on shows, movies, anything. Because even if somebody is going to film a sex scene and they're still fully clothed and someone has their hand here and they move it down to their bicep, that will be choreographed, rehearsed, agreed to. It's not something that they're just like, oh, yeah, do whatever feels natural, like just go with the chemistry. So I think that when you're hearing this from all of the cast members, male, female, everyone who was on the show, it definitely speaks more to the show and the network that they aren't setting these people up in the right way, and they're taking advantage and putting pressure on them in other ways, plus all the other things that I've mentioned in this video. So back to past me. But that isn't even the half of it, as season 3 is really when his behavior started to get completely out of control and things got a lot darker on the set of One Tree Hill. From the 3rd season, Mark Schwann became obsessed with Hilarie Burton and called her his muse. He made Hilarie Burton's life hell on that set, as well as a lot of the other cast members. Schwann was incredibly inappropriate with Burton, but also tried to use her as some sort of confidant when he would be inappropriate towards other actresses on the show. Burton said she received multiple late-night phone calls from Schwann during the 3rd season's production. He would tearfully declare his love for Danielle Harris, who's now Danielle Ackles, and Schwann claimed he was having a physical relationship with Danielle, which of course was not true. Burton said that on one phone call, she reprimanded Schwann and told him that she didn't want to be his confidant regarding any alleged affairs. The next day, Hilarie said she received flowers with an unsigned note that read, "Thank you for being my secret keeper." Danielle has also spoken out about Schwann's behavior. She spoke about filming on location with One Tree Hill and an incident that occurred at her hotel. Schwann came to her room in the middle of the night and banged on the door, screaming to try and get into her hotel room. Of course, Danielle was very scared when this was taking place, especially considering leading up to this incident, Schwann's behavior had continued to get creepier and escalate even further. Danielle ended up calling her boyfriend at the time, who's now her husband, fellow WB and CW star Jensen Ackles, who of course played Dean on Supernatural. Jensen ended up coming down and staying in the hotel with Danielle for a month, and at one stage almost came to blows with Schwann over his behavior towards Danielle and the other female cast members. Hilarie Burton, Sophia Bush, and Joy Lenz also have a One Tree Hill rewatch podcast called Drama Queens, and they actually have detailed a lot of what they went through with Mark Schwann on this podcast, and there are so many episodes where they talk about how Schwann inappropriately touched, grabbed, kissed, just was so inappropriate with them. And Sophia Bush actually talked about the first time he ever grabbed her inappropriately, and he grabbed her ass in front of a room full of people. And Sophia Bush actually hit him because he grabbed her inappropriately, and it was just her reaction. And he ended up taking her into his office and screaming at her, telling her that if she ever did that again, she'd be fired, and he would ruin her reputation and absolutely destroy her career. This was how he threatened them always. This wasn't unusual. He constantly screamed at them, threatened to fire them, and also threatened their careers. Due to all of Schwann's inappropriateness and harassment, Hilarie Burton reached a breaking point during the 6th season of One Tree Hill. She decided to abruptly leave the show after a conversation with Moira Kelly, who played one of the adults on the show, Karen Scott, the mother of Chad Michael Murray's character, Lucas. After all of Schwann's behavior, Hilarie was really upset one day on set And Moira Kelly ended up going and speaking to her and asking her what was wrong. Hilarie ended up speaking about wanting to leave the show and not knowing what to do because she didn't want to lose her career over this. And Moira told her, leave, you should leave. And Hilarie said that at that time, that was exactly what she needed to hear. She needed someone to say, you should go. And Hilarie and Moira have this conversation on the Drama Queens podcast where Hilarie said it was like getting permission. And just that little conversation really gave her the confidence to leave and know that she would be okay.
You could have done anything different with our show. As the experienced female actress on set, what would you have done different with One Tree Hill?
I will say it didn't stand out at the time because, again, having a small family and just looking at my work on that really as a 9 to 5. Like, usually when I work on a project, I would love hanging out with the crew on the weekend, hang out with actors, go out to dinner, go to all the parties. I was in a different place in my life. And, hearing honestly what all of you young women had to go through, I don't want to get choked up. If I could go back, I would have made my presence stronger there. And I felt like being somewhat of a veteran, you were also very young coming into this situation. There's a part of me that feels like I let you all down.
Oh my God, Moira.
No, Moira. No, I know. It's just my own, but if I had been more present, I would have been more aware maybe of what was going on. I surely would have said something. I surely would have done something. And so if I could do anything, go back and do anything different, I would make my presence so solid on that show. And I would have made myself so available to all of you.
You were, though. You were. Moira. This is the first time I've seen you since I left the show. And I wanted to tell you this for years and years and years. But in the last episode of the show, everyone in my world was telling me, you can't leave. You can't leave. I didn't direct because I didn't want to be on set all day because it was so bad. And I was in my hospital gown sitting in the lobby of the hospital because Peyton was like strapped to a table. And you came and you sat next to me and you started off by just joking. And you were like, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know what to do. And you said, run. And like, you like started it off with like a joke. And I was like, yeah. And you were like, you said to me, you said, there's so many chapters in life. And this is just one. This is just one. And you were the only person that gave me permission to go. But I so valued your opinion of me and of our business and the way you prioritized your family over work. And that's what I wanted. Like what you had is what I wanted. So you didn't have to say anything because you lived it and we could just like see it. So I hope I get to see you in person and like actually hug you. But like I have wanted to thank you for that. Honestly, since I was 26 years old, and I'm not 26 even close anymore.
And Moira, I have to say as well, it's such a double standard for women and so deeply unfair that responsibility should have even energetically fallen on your shoulders.
No.
None of us are supposed to go to work and deal with it. And you were not supposed to have to give up time with your infants to come and use yourself as a shield for your coworkers. It's wrong.
If you haven't listened to the Drama Queens podcast, I really, really recommend it. I do think that you get a lot of the behind the scenes information, but especially the episodes with Moira Kelly and Barbara Allen Woods, who played another mom on the show. They speak about how, as the older women on the show, they were trying to protect the younger cast members without it being known because, of course, if they made it obvious, they'd be moved around or manipulated, or they'd try and stop them, or they could even remove them from the show. So it's a really interesting listen. And of course, it also is a really emotional thing when they're speaking about this too. And I think it's really commendable that they are speaking out about everything that they endured in general, because it can't be easy to talk about all of this stuff. And also, even though it is a bit more common now because of Me Too for people to speak out about this, it's still extremely taboo in Hollywood. And Hilarie Burton especially has spoken about the fact that before she went public with all of this information, she had a conversation with her husband and basically said, listen, this probably is going to be the end of my career, because once you speak out, you are a lot of the time labeled as a troublemaker, and you're just tarred with this brush of being difficult or a diva or any of these things. And I did speak about this in my last video about the WB, that a lot of the time, especially the WB and CW, they will label these people who stand up for themselves or even stand up for other cast members or the crew as difficult because they just want people who are going to look the other way or comply because it makes it easier to deal with, and because it allows people like Mark SCHWAHN and other predators and people who are in power but doing incredibly inappropriate things, it allows them to continue. And Sophia Bush actually spoke about this as well on Drama Queens. She was talking about when they were putting together the letter against Mark SCHWAHN and when they were going public, she actually was going through a similar incident on a set she was working on at that time. And she wanted to speak out about that situation as well. And her managers actually said to her, you need to pick one. You need to do One Tree Hill and Mark SCHWAHN, or you need to speak about the incident that's happening now. Because they said to her, if you speak about both, it's going to be you are the problem and you are the diva or the issue or difficult. And that is so awful that you're saying you cannot speak about something you are going through because you're only allowed one. You're only allowed to speak out about one bad thing that happens to you. And again, that's why I think it is really good that they're doing this podcast and speaking about all of these things that happen to them, because it's just putting that out there and not burying it and hiding it behind the scenes where silence just allows these people to continue and to have more victims and to gain more power and keep doing these things on other shows and movies and throughout Hollywood. Okay, this is probably thrown in a little bit randomly, but I forgot to mention it when I was recording. But there is also a familiar face that is friends with Mark SCHWAHN and was also heavily involved with One Tree Hill, and that person is executive producer of One Tree Hill, Brian Robbins. And if you don't know that name, he actually is currently the head of Paramount Pictures. He was the president of Nickelodeon. And in the 80s, he basically was on a show called Head of the Class with Dan Schneider, who has been all over the media, especially the past couple of years, for his inappropriate with his TV shows on Nickelodeon. And if you want to know more about Schneider and Brian Robbins, I have a video on that. It wasn't my last video, which was about the WB. It was a video before that, so you can find out more about them in that video. Because after Schneider and Robbins were on Head of the Class together and hosted the first ever Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, Schneider only really was at Nickelodeon and brought in there because of Robbins. Schneider's shows were extremely successful, which makes sense as to why Nickelodeon wanted to retain Schneider. But what doesn't make sense is the blind eye Nickelodeon and the executives turned on Schneider's behavior, which was well known not only throughout Hollywood, but was even discussed publicly and online for many years before Nickelodeon and Schneider parted ways. Many would draw the conclusion that it was Brian Robbins and Dan Schneider's friendship that caused Nickelodeon and the executives to turn a blind eye to Schneider, his behavior, and how he ran his sets and treated his young cast. But I did just want to point that out for anyone who has either seen my past video or watched Quiet on Set or just knows a lot about the Nickelodeon stuff, because a lot of these people, they all move in the same circles, they all give each other jobs and do each other's favors, and when you start to look, you do see a lot of these people are all tied together and very connected. So after Hilarie Burton left the show, Mark SCHWAHN did try to go after her, did try and ruin her career. This also happened to many other female cast members after One Tree Hill ended, because anytime anyone wanted to hire any of them, a lot of the time those producers or casting people would reach out to Mark SCHWAHN to ask them about working with Burton or Bush or any of the other actresses. And he also tried to spread rumors about them and lies and other things. And there is an episode of the Drama Queens podcast. It's the 4th season finale, where it's the last episode that they're in high school before the time jump with season 5. And they actually have Danielle Ackles on, and the four of them discuss how over the years they've heard rumors or lies about one another that have clearly been spread by SCHWAHN, or even people have told them, oh, Mark SCHWAHN told me that.
You guys know this was not a good episode for me with our boss. It was like the worst. And we shot most of our episode during the week, and then we had our weekend where our wrap party was going to be, and they had to pick up a couple more days after the weekend. So we're at the wrap party, and we're all like, you know, sing karaoke and just having a good time. And I find out our boss had spread the rumor that that I was the ringleader, and we were all doing cocaine to stay up while we were filming. Yes.
I recall that.
He was telling everyone I was doing cocaine because we'd had an altercation with one another, and he wanted to discredit me. So he tells everyone that we're doing coke.
But by the way, just so you know, after you left, he did a whole nother round of that, either like season 7 or season 8.
Fantastic.
Because how inappropriate he was being with the next batch of girls he brought into the show was coming to light. So he started another whole thing that all the girls were doing coke and all that. And it was like, what is wrong with you? Also, do you have one story a decade?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so embarrassing. And
no one was doing coke then. That's
No
a
one.
good 90s thing.
Right. I was like, oh, what? Maybe if he would have said like hot, maybe, but not even. I mean, it was like, that was not the thing.
No.
I mean, drinking, yeah, maybe. I might have been like guilty of that once or twice.
Drinking? Yeah, we drank all the time.
there was nothing else to do there.
Yeah,
But-
that's not illegal. But it makes me wonder how many like casting directors and producers and executives back in Los Angeles heard the rumor that Hilarie Burton's doing cocaine, which
Well,
I still
can
never
tell you.
touched.
I can tell you one or two did because on my next job after that, I was asked like,
What?
so how much of a problem like are you? How much of? And I'm like, I'm kind of no problems. You know, I don't.
We're good.
But yeah, that was definitely like okay because I spoke to like one of your previous employers. I was like, hey, I think I know who it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he loved being in that seat, just getting
Yeah.
those phone calls because he was super happy to just say anything that he could to keep people from hiring us at any moment.
He called my bosses on white collar. When I got my job on white collar, they're like, we got a weird phone call.
Yeah.
I'm like, of course you
That's
did.
exactly how it started with me.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting phone call from your previous employer. I'm like, Warner Brothers? What? Who?
Yeah.
They're like, well, no, it was an individual. I'm like, okay, I know.
You're like,
Never mind.
oh, I know who it is.
They also talk in that episode about how when they were filming the season 4 finale, that was when they all knew about not being the only one receiving this incredibly inappropriate and horrendous behavior from Mark SCHWAHN. And they also knew during the filming of this episode that Mark SCHWAHN was the one that was trying to keep them all apart and was lying to do so.
You know, I don't know if you remember it, Hill. I'm going to lightly refer to something that if you want to talk about, because it's your story, but, you know, we have that lovely moment. Brooke and Peyton have that scene, and I'm emotional with you, and you're really emotional with me. And it's such a... It's a moment that I really love to watch because it's beautiful. And it makes me really sad because we were alone in that scene. You know, there's a wide cut where there's a bunch of people behind us, but what you do with all the extras when, you know, there's people behind them, but then the actors face each other in a different direction is the extras go away so that things are quiet and it's easy to mix. And we hadn't been alone in a while, I don't think, you and I, in a scene like that, if I'm remembering correctly.
Not since we were brutally attacked at the prom.
That's right.
God.
And you know, things were really getting, as intense as they've been that people know about, they were getting worse by the end of this season. And there was a moment where in, you know, rehearsal, our boss walked up and started, like, grabbed us both by the shoulders and started, like, very aggressively rubbing our backs. And I remember freezing up and looking at you, and you looked at me, and you really let him have it. It was a moment where, like, I saw the shock on his face that you snapped at him. And I remember finally feeling like I could take a deep breath because, like, somebody else had seen it and it was happening to somebody else. Like, it wasn't an isolated incident. And it was a moment where, when you think about all the stories he liked to tell about all the girls, where being in the room and seeing your reaction, I went, oh, a bunch of the shit that we're all being told about each other just isn't true.
Yeah.
Got it. And it was a big, big moment, and I've never forgotten it.
So they were filming this 4th season finale during a really big night shoot, and they go into a lot of detail in this episode, and I'll put some clips in.
He had crafted this episode as his fantasy, which is why Elizabeth is in a little leather skirt, and it's why Rachel's back, and it's why we're all doing a dance routine. And it's why Peyton is saying, oh, I just love sex so much. You know, it's why I had to make that line sound really stupid and goofy because it wasn't scripted to be stupid and goofy.
What was the line?
Peyton, you know, is talking to Clean Teen Shelley, and she's like, oh, no, I think it's cool. I would have joined your group, except I love sex so much, you know? And it wasn't scripted to be, like, goofy, and I was directed to do it not goofy, and I was like, no.
I totally would have joined if I didn't love sex so much.
You can tell the episode is a fantasy, and he made us all take group photos with him in that house. He came up to our dance rehearsals. We were doing dance rehearsals in the second story of the house while they would set up cameras and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And he would not stop touching people, and it was relentless. And I knew it was happening to me. I'm watching it happen to Danielle and Elizabeth and you.
Yeah,
Like, he's
yeah, I
touching
remember.
everybody, touching Lassiter, touching everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, to your point, he came up and was like rubbing our shoulders. And I said, stop touching the girls, dude. Stop. I'm telling you, as your friend, stop touching the girls. And like, I looked at you and it felt like telling the truth for the first time. You know, it's like when you speak back to your father figure or your boyfriend for the first time in front of people, you know, it's like, how dare you air our dirty laundry, you know? And so that was the Friday night of that week that we shot at the house. It was the last day we were there. And so I went to the production office at dawn, the same way I always did, because my boyfriend was an assistant director. And, you know, our executive producers are all there. Greg Prange, David Hartley, the entire AD staff, my brother's there. Like, everyone is in the production office drinking PBRs. And it's like, awesome. All right, wrap party is, you know, in 12 hours, whatever. And I get, you know, somebody came to the AD's door and said, our boss wants you in his office right now. And this is why he spread the coke rumor. I had to go in there and he just fucking launched into me. How dare you? Don't you ever speak to me that way in front of people. What the hell are you talking about? I don't touch anybody. I don't touch anybody here. You're spreading rumors about me. And just completely like was gaslighting me. And I'm like, dude, I'm friends with your wife. Like, I'm telling you, you have to stop. And he said, I'll never forget it. He said, you think we're friends? I'm not your friend. I'm your boss. And don't you ever speak to me that way again. And he's screaming at me. And those walls in the production office are paper thin.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother, my boyfriend's dad are all on the other side of these paper thin walls, and no one came.
Yeah.
Like no one came. And so finally, Greg Prange came in and was like, hey, is everything okay in here? And so, you know, cut to years later, the night that Danielle introduces me to my now husband, we're in Timmy Nolan's Irish pub. And I didn't know Jeff from Adam. Like, I'd never met this person. And Jeff, he leans over at one point. He's like, hey, are you getting screwed with your boss? You know, the same way Danielle is. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going back. I'm done. And he was like, I'm going to kick that guy's ass. And it was the first person in my whole life who had ever said it. And I believed it. And I still believe it. Like, I know. I mean, it was just for so many years, when you're the loud girl, you're just kind of expected to fend for yourself. And that was the first person that was ever like, oh no, I'll destroy that guy. Hold on. Let me go do it right now.
Mark Schwann also wanted to destroy any sort of popularity that Hilarie Burton had within the One Tree Hill fandom, because he never asked her to return to the show, but he ended up putting it out in the media as if he had invited her back, but it was her who was choosing not to come back. So Hilarie Burton never ever came back to the show, and a lot of fans were really upset by this, particularly that she missed the series finale, because Chad Michael Murray and pretty much everybody returned for that. And she also missed the wedding of Brooke Davis, that's Sophia Bush's character, and Sophia Bush's character and Hilarie Burton's character are best friends. So a lot of people were really upset that Peyton, Hilarie Burton's character, wasn't there for that. But in reality, it was because Mark Schwann never invited her and then would tell the fans and the media that, oh, they put the offer out, but she said no. And even in the 6th season, when she was going to leave, Mark Schwann was telling the media and fans that she actually was in negotiations and she wanted more money and they wouldn't be able to fulfill this huge request that she had for more money, and that was why she wasn't returning. There are some CWWB cast members who seem to go on to kind of regret and resent the characters they play and the success that those CWWB shows had. And I think that's why Hilarie Burton has been so clear that she really loves One Tree Hill and the fans and the character she played. And that all leads me into saying that is why the Drama Queens podcast exists. Sophia Bush, Hilarie Burton, and Joy Lenz, because they didn't want this whole Mark Schwann being a creep to be the legacy of One Tree Hill. They wanted to take back their show, both for themselves and for the fans. The One Tree Hill Rewatch podcast is actually called Drama Queens because that is one of the things that Mark Schwann used to call them, and also a label that he threatened them with, saying that he would, ruin their reputations and tell everyone they were nightmares and drama queens and divas and difficult. So I do like that they're poking a bit of fun at themselves with the name of the podcast, and I do actually think that the podcast is pretty well done. I do like all of the behind the scenes stuff that they talk about, and they just really give some interesting takes, especially when they're talking about a lot of the things that they went through when they were working on the show, and they bring on all the other cast members. And I just think it's a really nice thing to see 3 cast members all just enjoying a big show that they were part of, and a lot of the fans really seem to enjoy it too. However, I will say that hold on to that, because in the final chapter we're going to discuss some controversies with the Drama Queens podcast and some alleged feuds, but that is for later in the video. One thing I want to mention is when a lot of people hear this story, or even stories from other TV shows or films like this, they'll say, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just leave the show? And I do think that that is a bit of a silly question, because why should they leave the show when most people, this is what they dream of? Like, not every actor, like probably 0.1% of actors get this level of success, a huge show that goes on for 9 years. And, you know, back then there was DVDs and syndication and all these things. This is a huge, huge break, and potentially a paycheck that could set you up for the rest of your life and go on to give you other roles throughout your career. And why should they leave when they're doing absolutely nothing wrong? It's the behavior of this absolute creep who is going around and grabbing and touching people and kissing them when they are pushing him away, even though he's married also, and he's being manipulative, lying, ruining people's careers, lying about them doing drugs and all these other things. So I don't think they should be expected to do that, one. But also, I think a lot of people, when they don't have like any sort of experience in film and television, they picture the cast and directors and showrunners, but they don't realize that these shows are absolutely enormous productions. You're talking about hundreds of people's job. And when you're on a show, especially for a number of years, you end up getting close with people, and a lot of the crew members who are camera operators and grips and PAs, they're not being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. They're being paid a salary, and a lot of them are independent contractors too. They have kids, they have lives, they have bills, and if all of these cast members, say the 3 female leads, Hilarie, Burton, Sophia Bush, and Joy Lenz, they all just left, that would absolutely destroy the show. And there's no way it would have gone on for 9 seasons. It probably would have ended straight away, but they would have lost all of the jobs that those crew members had. They would have lost all those paychecks. And if a show's abruptly canceled, they might be out of work for a significant amount of time, especially now where the film and television industry is going through a really bad period. I know people who have been working in the industry for 20 years, and this is the first time ever they've been unemployed and unable to get work for months, because now that all these streaming networks are shrinking and making less and less shows, we're also seeing streaming networks starting to combine together because they cannot continue the way they are. And there is even less money out there because they've taken away things like syndication and DVDs and all of the other ways that you used to make money. So I really think that just saying, oh, they should leave is not really the right thing to say, because it should be Mark SCHWAHN that should leave, because he is the one doing the horrendous behavior, and those cast members have every right to continue on with a job that they really like and that they're being paid for and is a high point of their career. Also, leaving a show when it's extremely successful, say Sophia Bush left after the 2nd season, that also can severely, severely damage your career, because people don't want to hire you for another show because you might just leave that too. And of course, there will be rumors and speculation as to why she left, and did she really get fired? Was she doing something inappropriate? Because who walks away from a successful show? And again, we spoke about this in my last video in reference to Charmed and Shannon Doherty. So it is one of those things that would follow you around. And the final thing to say is, although yes, they were all adults, apart from James Lafferty, who was 17 when he was cast, they were all incredibly young, and this was the vast majority of them's very first real acting job. This was Hilarie Burton's first ever audition ever. She was a host on TRL for 2 years prior to that, and she'd never even been in an audition. And so these things, when you're young and it's your first experience, you don't want to make waves, you don't want to cause all these issues, and also you're going to believe what your boss is telling you because you think your team and you're all in this together and you want the successful show. And the fact that they're these normal, struggling, everyday actors, and then overnight they're super famous and, you know, on this successful TV show making pretty decent money. The CW and WB really seems to thrive and seek out these young, unknown, naive actors to be the face of their network, and they don't give them any sort of guidance or help or anything like that. They have details in the Drama Queens podcast how they basically were given like a small stipend and told, okay, move to Wilmington, North Carolina. And I do think that, yes, they are adults again, but the fact that there are so many WB and CW stars who have just gone on to have so many problems and issues, but also things like this where so many CW and WB stars have been taken advantage of on the sets of WB and CW shows. I mean, again, my last video was just all about the horrific things that were going on these sets. And as I've said, I have a lot more videos in the works of CW shows that there's even more terrible things that have gone on those sets. So it's just one of those things where I think we really need to look at what is going on these networks and how they are treating people on these sets, because there seems to be a lot of people that are just given blind control and told they can do whatever they want, and they take advantage of a lot of people on these sets. And again, as I said, a lot of these cast members, it was their first ever acting job. I think that there needs to be a bigger look into what the hell is going on the CW, but we'll save those other CW sets for another day. And now we're going to get into much more of what was going on the One Tree Hill set, including some cults and crimes involving One Tree Hill cast members. So we're going to start off this chapter by discussing Joy Lenz, who played Haley Scott on the show, and her involvement with a cult that she was in for pretty much the entire 9 seasons that she was on One Tree Hill. The first time that she ever mentioned anything about this cult was in relation to actually Allison Mack, because of course they were all on the WB together, and when NXIVM was brought down and everything was in the press about them, Allison Mack had actually tweeted at Joy Lenz years earlier, and in my Allison Mack and my last video about the WB, I did talk about how this was pretty common for Allison Mack. She used to tweet at tons of celebrities pretty frequently, and Joy obviously thought nothing of the tweet or ignored it, and when everything was happening with Mack being arrested, she actually replied to the tweet and said, no thanks, basically. I don't want to be in NXIVM. I was already involved in a cult, but when you're kind of through to the other side, give me a call, basically. And she didn't really go into a lot of depth about what happened with the cult, her involvement, how she got out. The first time she ever really discussed it was last summer in July 2023 during an episode of the Drama Queens podcast that she does with Sophia Bush and Hilarie Burton. I know I've mentioned the Drama Queens podcast a couple of times throughout this video, but in the last chapter, we will actually discuss it a lot more because there are some current day controversies going on with the podcast and the hosts. So stay tuned to the very end to discuss that. And also the chaos that Sophia Bush is causing in the lesbian community. It's a little bit of a One Tree Hill L-word crossover. So that is going to be in the final chapter. So Joy was an only child, and she actually started working in the acting world and on soap operas when she was in her early teens. So she'd been involved in Hollywood a bit more than anyone else on the One Tree Hill cast. And by the time she went on the show, she actually was looking for just a bit of community, and she ended up joining this Bible study class, or what she thought was a Bible study class, and it turned into something a lot more sinister. Joy described the group, which was called the Big House Family, as a woven web of manipulation, abuse, and fear under the guise of a church covenant. The leaders of the Big House Family convinced Lenz to give up her autonomy and pressured her to relocate to their compound in the Pacific Northwest, which Joy actually did. When Joy moved, one of the controlling ministers allegedly convinced her to marry one of his sons while steadily stealing millions of dollars from her One Tree Hill income. As I mentioned, the cast and crew of One Tree Hill were aware that Joy was involved with this group, and they tried to extract her from the group many times. Joy has spoken out now about what was going on when her cast and crew were trying to help her, and she said they were really amazing to try and get me out, but at the time she was really stubborn and really believed in the group and what they were doing. And of course, she was also married to one of the leader's sons, and she was not only having money taken from her account by these people, but like so many of these cults and MLMs, like the Twin Flames one I spoke about a few videos ago, they all work in kind of a multi-level marketing way where they will make you shell out for these very expensive courses and coaching and other nonsense. Even Scientology does this with all of their OT levels and things. So it's not unfamiliar, and over the 9 seasons, Joy was in pretty much every episode. There was a couple that she missed. I think it's 3 that she missed total, but she was in over 180 episodes, being paid a lot of money, and I'm sure they really siphoned off a lot, especially because she's saying it was allegedly in the millions of dollars. In some of the episodes of Drama Queens and also some of the interviews that I've read with Joy, she has spoken about how when she saw the NXIVM documentary, The Vow, that she really related to what a lot of the people who were in NXIVM were discussing, and she said that there were a lot of similarities between the leader of her group and Keith Raniere, who of course was the leader of NXIVM. Joy actually became friends with Sarah Edmondson, who is one of the faces of The Vow and someone who has spoken out a lot about her involvement with NXIVM, and she was also a good friend of Alison Mack when they were both involved within the NXIVM group. Like many cults and MLMs and controlling groups like that, Joy said that she was encouraged to isolate from pretty much anyone who was not within the group, family, friends, and her co-stars. She's also gone on to speak about the fact that the group really, really encouraged her to turn down a lot of auditions and roles, and there are some roles that she allegedly was offered that were for some pretty significant parts in big films and TV shows that she had to turn down because, or they encouraged her to turn down because they didn't want her playing certain characters or being taken away from the group, because One Tree Hill, as I've spoken about earlier, they ended up filming the entire show in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is a pretty small town. The airport, I think they've mentioned on Drama Queens, only has 6 gates, which is similar to one of the airports in one of the places that I live for certain parts of the year. So I think that the cult that was based in Los Angeles really didn't want her going on to other projects, because that's time away from their control and being around those people. And it also opens up the chance of other people maybe having a chance to try and get Joy out of this group. When Joy was asked how she ended up joining the group and how it changed, she was quoted as saying, "I felt like I was being loved. They start to convince you that you're amazing, you're wonderful, and then they tear you down and start picking at all the little things until you feel like nothing. And then they start to build you back up again. It's like these people love me in spite of the fact that I'm just such a mess." When One Tree Hill was filming their final season in 2012, Joy actually ended up leaving the group right after production wrapped on the series. She was out of the group before they actually aired the episodes on television. Very quickly after leaving the group, she ended up divorcing her husband, and she took her daughter and left the group. And her daughter was actually the reason that she wanted to leave, because when she became a mother, she didn't want her daughter being involved with this group, growing up in this community, and having their ideas and sort of way of life pressured and pushed onto her daughter. Joy actually credits One Tree Hill in helping her get out and for not being so deeply brainwashed into staying, because she went and spent 9 months of the year in North Carolina, and this whole group was based in Los Angeles. So she was able to spend all this time away from the group. And when she did want to leave, she was supported by a lot of her friends and other people on the show and crew members. She actually spoke on the Drama Queens podcast about how when she left the group and left her husband, she and her daughter moved in and lived with Paul Johnston, who played Dan Scott on the show, Nathan and Lucas's father. And she speaks really, really highly of Paul, and he seemed to do a lot to help her get out of this situation and support her and her daughter. Joy Lenz's husband, Michael Gagliotti, had a lot of issues with alcohol, and when Joy and Gagliotti divorced, he began drinking even more excessively. He was arrested numerous times for driving whilst intoxicated, and his alcoholism resulted in significant health issues like hypertension, diverticulitis, high cholesterol, and fatty liver disease. Gagliotti ended up passing away shortly after his divorce from Lenz due to a heart-related issue. So everything that I've just discussed is pretty much everything that's publicly known about this group that Joy was a part of from her point of view, because she hasn't gone into excessive detail yet, because she's actually releasing a book about her experience in the cult and on One Tree Hill. It's coming out on October 22nd this year, 2024, and the book is called Dinner with Vampires: Life on a Cult TV Show whilst also in an actual cult. And as I said, that'll be coming out later this year. Something that, if there's enough material, I could maybe do a video on. It probably would be something that I would do over on my Patreon. I don't do any sponsorships on this channel at all. So if you want to support the channel or want some extra content, my Patreon is linked in the description box if you want to check it out. But absolutely no pressure. Subscribing is also a great way to help out the channel. And thank you so much to anyone who does that. But no pressure again. I'm just really glad that you're here watching this, so thank you so much. The official synopsis for Dinner for Vampires Sources reads, in the early 2000s, after years of hard work and determination to break through as an actor, Bethany Joy Lenz was finally cast as one of the leads on the hit drama One Tree Hill. Her career was about to take off, but her personal life was slowly beginning to unravel. What none of the show's millions of fans knew, hidden even from her co-stars, was her secret double life in a cult. So now we're going to discuss one of the cast members that was arrested while they were on One Tree Hill, starring in One Tree Hill. But I will say, for such a large cast, for a show that was on for so many years, the One Tree Hill cast didn't really have a lot of legal issues that are known anyway. This is one of the only arrests that took place that we know of when the show was actually being filmed. This incident involves Antoine Tanner, who of course played Anton Taylor on the show, but most people on the show called him Skills. He was on the show for the entire 9 seasons. He did jump around a bit. In the earlier seasons, he was a recurring character, and then seasons 4 through 7, he was in the main full-time regular cast in the credits. And then for the last 2 seasons, he was a recurring character again, and that was because of this incident. Also, I do think he might have been dropped down anyway to recurring in the final season or the final 2 seasons, but they did have to move things around because of what happened with this arrest that we're going to discuss now. Most people probably would know Tanner from One Tree Hill, but he was also part of the cast of Coach Carter, which was written by Mark SCHWAHN, who was the creator and showrunner of One Tree Hill. And Coach Carter came out in 2005, right when they were filming the 2nd and 3rd season of One Tree Hill, and it actually was the film debut of Channing Tatum. And of course, Coach Carter, most people probably know this, Samuel L. Jackson played the main character, and it was based on a true story. It was a pretty big success, and actually there's a little story in one of the articles that when Anton was in court, actually someone recognized him outside the court and said, "Oh, you were in Coach Carter," but that's probably his most well-known film role, and then One Tree Hill is definitely his most well-known TV role. So when One Tree Hill was airing the second half of the 6th season, Tanner was actually arrested for Social Security fraud. This happened a few days before the last couple of episodes aired for the season in April 2009. Tanner surrendered to prosecutors and was arraigned that same day on April 16th, 2009 in a Brooklyn federal court. When arraigned in Brooklyn, Tanner pleaded not guilty to the 2-count indictment, which alleged that he and other individuals were involved and engaged in the fraudulent scheme between 2005 and July 2008, where they were selling more than 16 fake Social Security numbers and cards for $10,000 each, and they allegedly sold these to multiple undercover agents. In January 2010, Tanner was arraigned in court and pleaded guilty. He wasn't actually fired from the show, and the CW just said that they were monitoring the situation. Tanner's lawyer described the decision to sell the fake Social Security cards as stupidity and motivated by financial reversals, as Tanner had lost $1 million house due to foreclosure in California. On January 14th, 2010, Tanner was sentenced to 3 months in prison. This was a very light sentence considering what he was facing, but it was justifiable because he had absolutely no criminal record. He had done everything that they asked him to do, fully complied, pleaded guilty, accepted what he'd done, and wanted to make amends. He also was full-time employed and seemed to have a really great reputation. I will also say I have heard nothing but really great things about him, and he is one of the people that through all of the interviews and videos and everything that I look into for these videos, all you hear about him from other cast members is just like really, really nice things. So this does seem out of character for him because I haven't seen anybody really say anything bad about him, and just that he was a really great guy on the set and seemed to really have a great relationship with pretty much everyone. He also had to do 5 months house arrest after the 3 months in prison, and he did petition to have this house arrest shortened so that he could go back to filming in North Carolina, but he ended up being ordered to surrender to prison on April 13th, 2010, which did kind of line up in a good way because One Tree Hill, of course, was on hiatus, as most shows that are on, the usual September, October to May season, most of them go on hiatus at the end of April through to July. So he served his prison sentence while the show was on hiatus, so that worked out well. Tanner ended up serving his sentence and then returned to One Tree Hill for the final 2 seasons, and he ended up being one of very, very few cast members, I think there's about 4 of them, that was in the pilot episode and was in the last ever episode, the series finale. So before we get into the current day One Tree Hill cast members, controversies, feuds, dramas, and a little bit of LGBTQ chaos, I want to dial the clock back and discuss some of the issues, drama, and relationships that happened behind the scenes of the show between the actors. There were a lot of romantic relationships behind the scenes on One Tree Hill, but in the earlier seasons, in the kind of mid-2000s, there was no hotter topic than the relationship between Chad Michael Murray and Sophia Bush. Chad Michael Murray played Lucas Scott, who really, especially in the earlier seasons, the show was centered around, and Sophia Bush played Brooke Davis, who went on to be the lead of the show through all 9 seasons. She was one of the few cast members who was a regular throughout the entire run. The only other one who was full-time for all 9 seasons was Joy Lenz. And I know some people say James Lafferty too, but he, even though he was still in the main credits and everything for season 9, he did miss a few episodes. Sophia Bush actually is the only person who appeared in every single episode, except she was not actually in the pilot. And I bring that up because they actually added her character in episode 2. And so she was moved down to Wilmington a little bit later than everyone else because they had all shot the pilot. And Joy Lenz actually ended up joining the cast a little bit later too, because she was recast in the role. Somebody else had played Haley. And so they'd already shot the pilot. Joy had to go and film like the Haley scenes, and then they had to put them in. It's a pretty common thing. In my last video about the WB, I mentioned about Alyssa Milano being a recast role in Charmed. Allison Hannigan was actually a recast role in Buffy too. It's a pretty common thing. When they went down to start shooting for the actual series, Sophia Bush was added to the cast, and then she actually met Chad Michael Murray on the set of One Tree Hill. They ended up in a romantic relationship pretty soon after they met, and they were dating while their characters started dating as well, with Lucas and Brooke starting a romantic relationship in the very early episodes of season 1, with them first hooking up in episode 9 of season 1. So Chad and Sophia started dating in 2003, and very quickly the following year, in 2004, Chad Michael Murray actually proposed to Sophia Bush at his penthouse. 500 candles filling the room, spelling out "I love you," and a big grand gesture with flowers and all these things.
Was I anxious about asking Sophia to marry me? Who wouldn't be? I had to go and hunt down about 500 candles.
You know what, dude? You only do this once. I'm gonna do this right. Screw the fact if it costs money. She's worth it.
So she, of course, said yes.
So she runs inside and pulls her bag and sees everything and just says, "We're not going anywhere, are we?" I threw my arms up in the air because I was elated. And I said, she said yes.
They very quickly got married. Sophia Bush and Chad Michael Murray have been asked about each other for the last 20 years. And Sophia Bush has spoken about the fact that she very much was not totally on board with the marriage.
Sophia is, I guess she's my cool breeze. She's wonderful, she's kind, she's intelligent, and she makes me happy. I woke up one day and I said, this is the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with.
Sophia Bush actually said she felt a lot of pressure from the higher-ups on One Tree Hill, like the executive producers, the showrunner creator, and other writers and producers, that they were telling her, it's so great when you're with Chad because he shows up on time and he's prepared and all of these things. And everybody kept telling her that, oh, the show's working so well because you're getting Chad to do XYZ. And also, I'm sure the media and fans also were putting a little bit of pressure on that because, I mean, if you didn't watch the show when it was airing, it was a really, really big thing. Like, Chad Michael Murray was one of those guys of the moment of 2003, probably through like 2005, 2006, where he was on everybody's, well, obviously not mine because I was more focused on Sophia Bush than him, but he was on everybody's wall. He was on all the covers of magazines. And Chad Michael Murray in a white tank top is the absolute epitome of 2003. So I'm sure even if it was a little bit of an unconscious thing, that it was, oh, the fans and the show and everybody really likes us together, and the media as well were very, very into their relationship and were constantly interviewing them, and magazines and posters and all these things. So I can see how they might have both been a little bit sucked into it. And also, these shows like CW and WB shows very much play into this whole thing of their cast members being together. And maybe that's a little unfair to say because I feel like it's just inevitable that some of these cast members will get together because a lot of them are on these shows for years. They're working 16, 17, 18-hour days sometimes, 6 days a week. And a lot of the time, the cast members that had previously lived in LA are all picked up and moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, or Vancouver, or Georgia. And although a lot of these places are big cities and there's lots going on, they're kind of transplanted from these other places. So it's not like they have a network and community around them of their friends and people they know. So when they are moved, especially with One Tree Hill, because it was a very small town that they filmed in, where a lot of the locals, they were able to to see all of this play out in real time. And I will talk about some of the things a little bit later that some people from Wilmington have reported seeing over the years. But when they're moved to these places and they're working all these crazy hours and they're in these high pressure situations where they also have to be careful about who they are bringing into their lives because now they do have this spotlight on them. So I can see how a lot of them end up dating each other. But I will also say the WB formerly and the CW today definitely doesn't discourage this. And in my opinion, I do think that at least in some cases, they do encourage it because, let's be honest, it gets attention on the show and it gets people talking about the show. It gets the media talking about the show, and it's more eyes and gossip and everything like that, that if anything, it's just helping the show. So of course they're maybe not going to go out and like match people together, but they certainly are probably rubbing their hands together when they hear, oh, another cast member is with another cast member. So the year after they got engaged, on April 16th, 2005, they ended up getting married in Santa Monica at an oceanfront wedding, and they had a beautiful day and had cast members from the show. They had, I believe, 200 guests. They also did this huge announcement, and, you know, there was so much media and even just like message boards and fans of the show. This was a huge, huge thing, and so many people were talking about the fact that Lucas and Brooke got married, but it was very short-lived for the both Lucas and Brooke shippers and for the fans of Chad and Sophia together, as just 5 months after they got married, they separated. They released a statement which in part read, "This is a difficult and unfortunate situation. I'm glad this is being resolved sooner rather than later." This was Chad Michael Murray speaking. After another 5 months, Sophia Bush actually filed for an annulment. However, this was rejected. And when she filed the annulment, she actually cited fraud as the reason why she was seeking one. One of her friends ended up speaking to People and said that Sophia went into the marriage believing in the sanctity of marriage, and Chad did not share this vision. So what happened? This is when the rumors and gossip really went into overdrive, because a lot of people prior to this had been speaking about the fact that Chad Michael Murray was cheating on Sophia Bush, but once they split up and separated, things really went into overdrive. A lot of things that had happened started to make sense, and there was a lot of puzzle pieces being put together. Probably the most well-known cheating rumor regarding Chad Michael Murray was that of Paris Hilton and Chad Michael Murray. So in 2005, they did a film together called House of Wax. And if Chad Michael Murray in a white tank top represented 2003, Paris Hilton and Chad Michael Murray together represented 2005, because they both were enormous at the time and really big people that were in a lot of magazines, and just a lot of people were constantly interviewing and talking about.
You're not going to talk about my explosion, are you? Because she had the camera on me when I got upset. I haven't said a damn thing. I'm playing single, solitary person. I've just done my job. Get that camera out of here.
And allegedly on the set of House of Wax, Chad Michael Murray and Paris Hilton ended up hooking up and being together for some time. This actually was kind of confirmed through Nick Carter, who might be a subject for a video in the future or a video on my Patreon, but he was actually dating Paris Hilton at the time that they were filming House of Wax, and he ended up telling the media that Paris Hilton had cheated on him with Chad Michael Murray. The following December, in December 2006, Chad Michael Murray and Sophia Bush finalized their divorce, as Sophia Bush's petition for an annulment was rejected. After Sophia Bush and Chad Michael Murray divorced, there were a lot of issues on the set of One Tree Hill, as they ended up continuing to have to work together for several more years, all the way up until Chad Michael Murray left the show during the 6th season in 2009. As I mentioned earlier, Sophia Bush said that she felt pressure from the One Tree Hill higher-ups, especially Mark SCHWAHN, to marry Chad Michael Murray. And she also said that after they ended up splitting up, that she really was hurt by what SCHWAHN was doing, because he was writing in their personal separation and struggles and making her reenact everything on the show. And SCHWAHN gets kind of a weird satisfaction out of doing these things. Bush and her fellow cast members on the Drama Queens podcast have spoken about the fact that SCHWAHN would take things from their own personal lives, but also would get the female cast members to basically act out some of his fanfics and fantasies, because they would be put in these situations that SCHWAHN was basically trying to rewrite some of his high school, with the fact that girls didn't talk to him in high school, and he had all these young beautiful actresses that he could get them to say and do whatever he wanted. And a lot of it was wish fulfillment, because the character of Mouth on the show, which is kind of a nerdy guy, and Mark SCHWAHN said many, many times that he basically wrote the Mouth character as himself in high school, and that he really identified with Mouth. He would put that character in certain situations to try and live out this weird fantasy he had. And you can even see this in some of the DVD commentaries. There's a really famous episode of One Tree Hill about a school shooting, and at the very end of the episode, the character of Mouth is crying and he's getting comforted by one of the characters, Rachel, who's played by Danielle Harris, and Mouth is like kind of like lying on her shoulder, like chest here. And in the DVD commentary, SCHWAHN keeps saying to the actor who played Mouth, Lee Norris, "Oh, don't you like how I wrote this scene, Lee? Isn't it great? Aren't you enjoying like what you're getting to do in this scene?" And it's just really creepy. There is a lot of stuff on those DVD commentaries that, yeah, I mean, it really lines up with a lot of the stuff that I have spoken about in this video about Mark SCHWAHN. In 2006, while Chad Michael Murray was going through his divorce to Sophia Bush, he met an extra on the set of One Tree Hill, a 17-year-old high school student called Kenzie Dalton. At the time, Chad Michael Murray was also known in the Wilmington, North Carolina area for going to the mall and going to lots of stores like Forever 21, American Eagle, and Abercrombie, and hitting on and finding girls that were in the senior in high school to senior in college sort of age bracket. Murray began dating Kenzie Dalton, and over the beginning of their relationship, there were a range of stories about, especially the beginning of their relationship when Kenzie was still in high school. There were things like him allegedly walking around at her graduation party with a bottle of liquor in his back pocket, and he was basically going around trying to fight people at this graduation party. There was another story where allegedly Murray wanted to go to Kenzie's high school prom, but apparently the school banned anyone who was over the age of 22. And so because he couldn't go, he ended up buying her a car and then inviting all her high school friends over and throwing them a massive party. Personally, you couldn't pay me to be around high schoolers, but their relationship ended up lasting for 7 years. They were engaged for the majority of that. Their relationship ended, and this will be shocking information, because Murray cheated on her. He ended up cheating on her with one of his co-stars. He actually was photographed at Chateau Marmont with his co-star at the time, Nikki Whelan. They ended up being caught by the paparazzi, and then Murray and Kenzie Dalton ended up breaking up. And then after they broke up, Murray started dating Nikki Whelan. Chad Michael Murray did go on to marry Sarah Romer in 2014, and they have 3 kids together. Editing Ash here. One thing that I just wanted to mention about Chad Michael Murray that I haven't spoken about in this chapter is the fact that Hilarie Burton has said many times that Chad Michael Murray was pretty much the only person who stood up for her on the set of One Tree Hill with all of the Mark SCHWAHN stuff. And I do think that's very commendable, especially because he was like in his 20s too, and he's basically standing up to his boss. So that is a nice thing to hear. And the other thing is, I'm sure in a lot of these clips, especially the behind the scenes on the House of Wax and stuff like that, that he maybe doesn't come across in the best light. And I would hope today that he's a different person and matured, because I think everybody's a little bit of an idiot in their 20s. And I cannot imagine what it must be like to be in your 20s, be a bit of an idiot, but then be told by millions of people that you're amazing and you're this big heartthrob. And he was a really, really big deal, like in the early mid 2000s. I was in high school when One Tree Hill came out. I was a sophomore the year that the OC and One Tree Hill came out, and I had just moved to America too. So it was all One Tree Hill and the OC. Like that's all anybody talked about. So I do think that although things didn't go well for him and Sophia, that hopefully now he has kids and everything like that. And I know both of them have spoken about the fact that they were really young when they got married, and I'm not excusing like cheating or anything like that, but at the end of the day, he did stand up for Hilarie Burton, and that is a pretty commendable thing. So back to past me. After her relationship with Murray, Sophia Bush did go on to date a couple of her other co-stars on the show, one of them being James Lafferty, and their relationship, the only things I ever heard about them was that they used to go to all the bars in Wilmington and just hardcore make out in the middle of the bars and then get into screaming matches in the middle of the bars. I mean, they didn't harm anyone, and it's kind of funny that they were doing this like in Wilmington, North Carolina. There's probably people watching them on TV and watching their drama on One Tree Hill, and then they're able to sit in the bar and see their real life drama. And apparently they ended up breaking up, and shockingly they were making out in the street, and then they ended up having a screaming match in the street, and that screaming match resulted in their breakup. Sophia did actually go on to date Austin Nichols, who was the actor who played the character that her character ended up with. There isn't a lot out there about their relationship, apart from some speculation around Austin Nichols, things like with Jake Gyllenhaal, but that's probably a topic for another day. So now let's skip forward to present day and discuss the current controversies, feuds, drama, and absolute chaos that the One Tree Hill cast is embroiled in. So I want to briefly address the drama queen's apparent feud right now, and also briefly discuss the Ashlyn Harris-Sophia Bush timeline thing that's going on. And also, sorry about the blanket, but this is where Miss G sits when I'm working. She normally will take a nap when I'm filming, but it's Miss G's world. We're just living in it. So drama queens, they apparently are having some drama of their own, as a lot of people are speculating there is a feud between Hilarie Burton and Joy Lenz at the moment. They are very differently aligned politically, and also it does just seem as though Joy is more of a colleague, and then Hilarie and Sophia are quite close friends. Even just stuff that they post on social media and things, Sophia and Hilarie are frequently together and talking about each other, and Joy just seems to be a work colleague. Hilarie is very outspoken about LGBT support, and she does say that she has a very hard line in the sand for people that are not supportive. And while she's never called Joy out or addressed it publicly. It's more, I don't want to say vague posting, but it's just she never seems to put someone's name or anything, which is totally understandable. And I also know a lot of people think that this issue lately has come from the fact that Joy is releasing a book that we spoke about in chapter 2 at the end of October. And when she released the cover, a lot of people compared it to the cover of Hilarie's first book that she released last year. And Hilarie also put out a post on social media that, again, didn't like target or name Joy, but it said something about basically she doesn't think imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, that she thinks it's annoying. So a lot of people think that that was in reference to Joy's book cover. They do seem to absolutely not have an issue when it comes to drama queens. I've watched the new episodes. They're covering season 6 right now. And if you were like a casual fan, or you were watching it just every couple of episodes, or, you know, you didn't follow everything on social media, I don't think that you would be able to say, oh, I think there's an issue between them. So I don't know basically if this feud is something minor, or if it's just been blown up a little bit, or they really are just colleagues and it's not as extreme as we think it is with their divide. Because I will also say that a lot of people, maybe 5 or even more years ago, it was pretty common for like actors and celebrities in general to have people managing and controlling all their social media accounts. But that's not really the style anymore. Most people, while they probably have someone monitoring comments and helping, it is primarily them posting and doing these things. And celebrities obviously know better than anyone how important social media is, but they also know how scrutinized social media is, and how people not only are seeing everything you're posting, but they're looking into your followers list, and if you're following the people you work with and your friends and things like that. And while some might think it's like a minor oversight that Joy and Hilarie are not following each other anymore, I think that that is probably the strongest thing that you can say. That's kind of weird, because they know how people are going to look and see that they're not. And also all of the tags of Hilarie and Joy, they've all been removed, which most people think that that's because one of them has blocked the other, which it does seem like it's Hilarie that's blocked Joy, because while I've been filming this video, Joy did recently post a post that she mentioned Sophia and Hilarie, but she only mentioned their first name, didn't tag them, collaborate, nothing. So it would lead you to believe that she's not able to because she's blocked. But I do also think that's just kind of a weird thing to do when you're doing a podcast together. But again, we just don't know is basically the sum up of this, because there does seem to be something there, but it's not anything really concrete that you can say, this is why they have an issue with each other, they're fighting, or any of these things. But something that is concrete is the relationship between Sophia Bush and Ashlyn Harris, who, in case you don't know, Ashlyn Harris is a soccer player for the US women's team, and she was previously married to Ali Krieger, who is a very popular US soccer women's player as well. And Ali is having her last season now because she's about to retire. Ashlyn and Ali also recently, in like the past year or two, have adopted 2 babies together. And a lot of people have been speaking out about the sort of light that has been shone on what has been going on with Sophia Bush and Ashlyn Harris, because when it seems the speculation began, it was before Ali and Ashlyn had actually started their divorce proceedings. And I want to go through like a little fast timeline of what we know, what's happening, and really get back to my lesbian drama roots, because in case you didn't know, I used to have a channel. My original channel was about the L word and other lesbian drama. So this is really my area of expertise. And I can also tell you, I've been hearing about this for well over a year now, close to a year, June, like end of June last year, because the lesbian community is tiny, and people like lesbians in the media, in sports and all these things, it's even smaller. So everybody knows everybody, and everybody's dated everybody. So you usually hear things pretty fast. And I believe it was Cannes last year where the speculation started about Ashlyn and Sophia. So now we're going to dial it back to last year around about this similar time, and Sophia had actually recently married Grant Hughes, who I heard that they were friends for like 10 years. They started dating in, I believe, May 2020. The following year they got engaged, and then they got married in June 2022. And they apparently nearly didn't get married, and Sophia nearly called off the wedding, but they did get married. It was a big, pictures and speaking about how happy they are. And I always am like, a little flag goes up in my head when I see people talking like nonstop about how happy they are and all these things, because I always think, if you're so happy, why are you on social media talking about it? But that's another story. I don't mean like once in a while, I mean like every day. So Sophia and Grant were married, and they really lasted about a year. And right before they separated, there was a post that Grant did that was praising Sophia, and then apparently she did a post because he did, and she knew people were watching on social media and felt pressurized by that to post that this marriage was the best decision of her life and she was so happy. And then a few weeks later they ended up separating, because they actually weren't even like physically together when this post went up, because Sophia was in London. So I'll just go down a little brief timeline so that we can set the scene here. So in June 2022, they got married, Sophia and Grant, in Oklahoma. She apparently nearly called the wedding off in April of that same year. In May 2023, Sophia starts a play in London that's called 220, A Ghost Story. So while she's doing this play, Sophia also talks a lot about her fertility process and how it's been very draining and just not going well. On June 11th, when she was in London, she ended up doing that post that I was referencing in tribute to her husband. It was the first anniversary of their marriage, saying how happy she was and it was the best decision of her life. And then she and her husband were seen on June 26th at a play, and on June 27th, that is actually when they listed their separation as, although they wouldn't go on to file paperwork for divorce for another month. And then on August 4th, 2023, Sophia filed for divorce from her husband, Grant. So their separation was listed as June 27th. The last time they were seen together was June 26th. And a week before that was when the Cannes Film Festival was. And because Sophia was in these back-to-back performances, she really only went there for 2 days basically, and that is also when Ashlyn was there. There's a lot of pictures of them together, but they have been friends for a few years before that. Sophia actually owns a small, I think it's 1% of a women's soccer team, and they've kind of all traveled in the same circles, and allegedly they also said that this is how they started getting closer. Was they had like a WhatsApp group where they spoke about separations and divorce, and that's when they started getting closer. But also a lot of people have spoken about the fact that now there's kind of this divide in women's soccer, because Sophia owns this team, and then Allie's still playing on the US soccer women's team, and it's they have friends in common. As most of the lesbian drama, it does get messy that way because you have a lot of the same friends, and there's a lot going on. But Allie has got a lot of support because she I think just has a really good reputation, and even a lot of the lesbian parties and things like that. I've been to a few where there's a lot of soccer players and things like that, and Allie is another person that I really have only heard really nice things about her, and I just that's all I've ever heard is good things. And it's very rare, again, that you have people that in this kind of world that you hear unanimously good things. At the Cannes Festival, Sophia and Ashlyn did actually do a panel with two other women where they spoke about branding, and there's pictures of that all over social media too. At the end of June, eagle-eyed sort of Sophia Bush fans saw that she had saved this TikTok video that was about how hot Ashlyn Harris is, and she'd saved it in her favorites. And then on July 4th, both Ashlyn and Sophia were at Wimbledon. Again, lots of pictures and stuff on social media. A lot of people started to put this together because they were following like all of their similar friends, and there would be stories posted on Instagram. I saw some of them, but at the time I wasn't thinking about saving them, and stories disappear then. And there would be ones where Sophia and Ashlyn would be way in the background, and one would have like their head on one shoulder and little things like that. Like, it was nothing blatant, but that is kind of where people started talking about it. And I even saw posts on social media, like when I was doing research before Ashlyn had separated and filed for divorce, and Sophia was already starting her divorce proceedings, and people were saying, oh, imagine if Sophia started dating like a women's soccer player. And people were saying, oh, well, she's been around Ashlyn a lot, but she's married, so nothing will happen there, which it's kind of ironic now. So in September, it seems as though Sophia Bush was in New York a lot. Ashlyn wasn't posting really to social media then, and they were cited at like a lot of different things together, like the US Open, NYFW, and just other shows throughout the city. And then on the 19th of September is when Ashlyn filed for divorce from Ali, and a lot of people apparently said that Ali found out from like someone else telling her. So it does seem like they'd been separated for a little bit, but people were genuinely like quite surprised by this. The very end of September, Sophia Bush and Ashlyn Harris, I don't know whether this was the 29th or the 30th of September, but they went to a Chelsea Handler show, and I heard from someone that they were basically on like a double date with Stacey London, who, if you're not from the UK, maybe you won't know her, but she did like one of those what not to wear shows. I'll put a picture of her so you know what she looks like. But in 2019, she announced that she was dating a woman. So it was Stacey London and her girlfriend, and Ashlyn Harris and Sophia Bush. So this was only like three and a half weeks after Ashlyn filed for divorce. On the 5th of October, they attended a Pink concert together in LA. And then on the 6th of October, they both, Ashlyn and Sophia, attended Megan Rapinoe's retirement game in Seattle. And then around the 11th of October, about a week later, is when all of the divorce news started to leak. So as I said, I had heard about this for a while. I think, if you look on the internet, everybody's been talking about this long before it came out. And I do want to think that there wasn't any cheating, but it does seem, even if there wasn't cheating, that it's very, very, very close to when they're splitting up and getting divorced to being in a relationship a few weeks later. Obviously, you want to think that there was no cheating going on, because that's just not a nice thing that would happen in a relationship. And they have young kids, Ashlyn and Ali, and you hear these things for years about certain people being cheaters and stuff like that, but you would hope that that isn't what had gone on. And there is little things like Hilarie Burton has defended Sophia on it and said, they know the timeline and they know that there wasn't cheating. If anything, even if there wasn't cheating, it was very close to when these things were happening. But obviously we're not in the relationships, we're not friends with them, we don't know the exact dates. Although I will say it is not uncommon at all for lesbians to break up with someone and then all of a sudden be in a relationship very quickly afterwards. And there's the famous joke about U-Hauls, and the joke is funny because the joke is true. So I honestly don't know what sort of conclusion to come to with this. I'd love to know what everyone thinks in the comments, because I'm sure there's people that have followed this more closely than I have, or know more about Ashlyn and Ali and Sophia and everything else that we spoke about in this video down below. As always, if you made it to the end, thank you so much. Leave MVP down below so I can thank you. I do have a Patreon now too, where I post other videos and I do lives, so check that out if you want to. If you want to help the channel, you can subscribe. I really appreciate it, but no pressure. And down below is also my social media and also my new editor, Evelyn Dar, who is an awesome friend of mine. I've linked her channel down below as well. And as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.